So recall on work restrictions and limitations, they are much the same, but work restrictions are those things that patients should not do because it's going to make them worse, whatever condition. And work limitations are those things that they can't do because they're physically not able to. But when it comes to writing what the restrictions and limitations will be, it's essentially the same thing. So, in doing writing work restrictions and limitations, um, we should focus on the job related tasks. What we want is that the restrictions limitations apply to what the employees are doing on the job and as narrowly focused as we can. Um, so, for example, when we've got patients that need restrictions, what they should not do, it's the patient with a back injury that's got a 50-pound, they can't really lift the 50 pounds. So there's a limit. And work restrictions, work limitations are the things that they can't do again. So it's the patient with a cast that can't climb a ladder or go up or down stairs. So we want to be focusing on the job related tasks, but bearing in mind that these apply 24/7. So they're not strictly related to what employees are doing on the job. They're also what activities they have off the job. So you want to test your restrictions, limitations in the sense of how is this going to apply to an employee at home or in the market or doing whatever else they do off the job. So they're 24/7 application. Now, some examples, and we've had some show up, and I've had some employers contact me and other charts that I've seen that we've been challenged a little bit in terms of how we describe some of the restrictions, limitations. Um, and so I just want to mention a couple. Not uncommonly, I see no use of hands, which is really fairly broad. And what we want to do in a situation like that is focus on what it is on the job that we want the employee to not do. So if they're a data processor, it may be instead of no use of hands, no use of computer keyboard, mouse, more than 30 out of every 60 minutes, or whatever period of time seems appropriate. Or if they're working in construction, no use of a hammer or no use of torque wrenches or no use of whatever specific thing, just trying to narrow it to what's going on in the workplace, bearing in mind again that whatever we put down as a restriction, and we'll use restriction for both, uh, test it against how that's going to apply at home. Um, no use of hands. Also, you can imagine if we have that restriction, then the person gets home and what is it they're supposed to do when it's time to shower or other activities. So be testing whatever you put against whatever is going to be, what will be their activities at home off the job. No heavy lifting. Most employers need some sort of number. So if you can indicate whatever the lifting limit is, and if there's a duration, then do that and be specific. It may be one hand or the other, or one body part or another. So again, being as specific as you can be as you write the restrictions. Sitting work, generally best, unless the person's got to be absolutely sitting all the time. Maybe use verbiage such as primarily sitting work or sedentary work with opportunities to stand or walk as needed for comfort or to perform simple tasks. And in some cases, you may want to specify how many, 15 out of every 60 minutes or whatever it might be. So being as specific as you can related to what's going on that doesn't restrict them off the job. No walking up or down stairs or climbing ladders. The test here is what happens to a person who lives in an apartment. You still need to, if it's appropriate on the job, to limit their walking up and down stairs or to climbing ladders. But again, test it to see what the implications are for home. And I think in Epic, it's useful to make these drop-down selections, but feel free to make free narrative text, add free narrative text. When you indicate in Epic that there's going to be um, a restrict, modified work, then a box pops up with choices on how to describe that modified work. And one of those choices is other. And I frequently put free narrative text into that space because I want to describe particularly what the restriction should be in terms of that person's job. So if you feel like the pop down choices that exist really don't describe what it is you're trying to accomplish, feel free to add free narrative text and and have that be the restriction that you want to apply. Now, what happens, of course, as I think you all know, is that the employer then determines if restrictions, limitations can be accommodated. Our job is to indicate what the employee should not be doing. You may also choose to describe, in addition, what is permissible, if that's appropriate. But the employer then determines if the restrictions can be accommodated or not. Some employers don't want anybody working until the patient is back to full, is recovered, able to do regular work. Others can accommodate restrictions. So employers can vary there, but the determination should be that the employer makes a decision about whether or not the restrictions can be accommodated. So in general, and I think and I think we're doing pretty well with this, employer, we should not be indicating that a patient should be off work. I'm looking at a chat here. Yeah, Alfred, Dr. Forrest makes the appropriate comment, and this is an interesting thought, that the most jobs or most employees don't show up with a job description. So what you need to do in many cases, if you've been seeing employees from particular employers, um, you'll start to get a feeling for what some of the jobs are. At Abbott, we see a lot of injured employees working in packing plants, and so we get a sense of what goes on there. So you need to make your best judgment based upon your experience uh, with particular jobs, as well as asking the employee, what they do, and then make decisions about what you think are appropriate restrictions. But again, let the employer make the decision about whether or not those restrictions can be accommodated. And again, only in unusual circumstances should we really be taking patients off if it's clearly obvious that that's the case. In terms of communicating these restrictions to the patient, um, again, asking them about what particular tasks cause them the greatest difficulty. Debating with a patient, most patients want to work. Most patients recognize that they may need, or many patients recognize they may need some restrictions, and they'll honor what we suggest, and there are employers that will work with those. But there's a small percentage that want to be off work or want to have they want to determine what the restrictions should be. Don't debate with the patient in those rare cases where situations like this come up. Just indicate that you're making a 24/7 decision in their best interest. That's going to limit activities that may aggravate their condition, and that this is what your recommendations are. And then if the patient disagrees with that, they should speak with the employer or HR or their adjuster, or in some cases their union. But let them pursue any disagreement they have with what your recommendations are for restrictions, and trying to find the middle ground. Again, our responsibilities to the patient. It's also our responsibility um, to get the patient back to work as quickly as possible, fully recovered, or as well as we can make them. And so our place really uh, is, if there's a dispute between the employee and the employer, if there's a relationship problem there, try and find the middle ground. We have a responsibility to the patient, but we also have a responsibility to the workplace. So we want to find that sort of middle ground where the best possible restrictions work. Really avoid the temptation for the patient to tell you what the restriction should be. You want to query them about what they do, but in the end, make your own decisions and verbalize it or write it as you think most appropriate. Restrictions and limitations, and I apologize for two typos here, should make sense. Again, it should be understandable to foreman or supervisor or others who may not have a lot of experience with interpreting job descriptions. Make it understandable so they can come up with whatever work assignment if they can accommodate restrictions, and attempt to advance the restrictions each visit. So each visit, lifting a little bit more, bending more, uh, diminishing the restrictions as you're able to. So there's demonstration that the patient's getting better, and then share your expectations with the patient. How long are these going to go on? What's the next step? You want to be sure that the patient expectations align with yours, so they know where you're going. Talk to them about the treatment plan, and the restrictions, limitations are part of that treatment plan. So the patient should understand where you're headed, when you think, to the extent you can predict when they're going to be well, and just so they understand, they're not surprised with what you're doing. So give those things some thought. I think we're generally doing a good job with limitations and restrictions, but keep those things in mind. Irma, are you there?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Um, Maybe you could take over and give us some thoughts. Actually, let me get my little sheet out. Wanted to talk about care gaps. Um,
Can I make a comment on the work comp?
please do.
So just like the patients often don't come in with a job description, they usually don't know what modified work is available for them. So on the first visit, I make clear to them that they need to take the paperwork we give them straight to their boss and say, I hurt my shoulder. I can't do much with my right arm. The doctor needs to know, like, is there a certain job and what I need to be able to do to work that job. And then every visit I say to them, did you talk to your boss? What did he say?
Yeah, well, that's a really good point. I think that's sort of communication. So it's not all one way from you to the patient, the employee, to the employer. The thing, of course, to bear in mind is because these are 24/7, although we're focusing on whatever whatever restrictions we think that they ought to have based upon their injury, and to whatever degree of information we have about what their jobs are. Um, what we're saying is that these are the things you shouldn't do, or you should do in a limited way. And then getting feedback, I think, is useful. Um, Honestly, sometimes I'll call the employer and talk to them about it if there's any question. Sometimes patients are a good source of information back to us, and sometimes they're not, unfortunately. And so we need to gather all information possible and then make our best objective decision. But you're right, it can be a challenge without job description. The other thing, to be honest, is some of the job descriptions we see aren't terribly useful, but sometimes they can be helpful. But that's a really good point about the job descriptions.
I'll have the patient pull out his cell phone, call his boss, and we'll have a three-way talk in the office.
Yeah, that can work. You want to use your time judiciously, but that's certainly a possibility as well. So good points. Good points.